Chapter 16, Returning Good for Evil. Dad was on the phone and the family was gathered around trying to hear the conversation. Oh boy, I'll go see what is going on. Dad hung up the phone before turning to explain the situation to Mom. That was Curvin. He is on the yearbook staff at school. They are working at school and they just saw someone sneaking around the school bus. I need to go investigate. Mom wrung her hands together. That could be dangerous. Be careful. Dad kissed her forehead. I would appreciate your prayers. He quickly left and headed up the dark alley for the school. Quietly, he approached the bus and cautiously opened the door. Is anybody in there? He called. There was no answer. Is anybody in there? He repeated. Finally, he climbed into the bus and paused to peer under the seats. At the back of the bus, under the last seat, he could see 2 pairs of shoes. He paused in fear for a second. Then he slowly walked back to the last seat. 2 pairs of eyes looked back at him. What are you doing here? He asked in a non-threatening way, hoping they would not attack him. 2 pairs of eyes stared solidly at him. We're running away from home. Dad paused to think of a response. Here's the deal. Who do you want me to call? I'm going to give you 2 options. I can call the police or your parents, but we have to let someone know where you are. The oldest boy answered, My dad is a policeman. Then that is who we will call, Dad decided. Is your dad a policeman too? He asked the younger boy. The boy slowly shook his head back and forth, indicating that his dad was not a policeman. Let's go to my house and make the phone call, Dad suggested. He carefully walked beside the 2 boys, hoping they would not try to escape. The children listened from the top of the steps as Dad called the police, and the 2 boys stood quietly beside him. Soon a police car pulled in front of the house. Dad invited the unhappy-looking officer inside. He looked around suspiciously until he was satisfied that the house was safe and the story matched up. The boys were returned to their homes, and Dad sighed with relief. Well, you never know what will happen in an evening. I'm up first, Marcus called as he rushed out the door with a bat and a glove in hand. Brian quickly joined him, and when Danny finally arrived, they were ready to start. 20 minutes into their game, Mom interrupted them by calling out the door. Brian, I need you to run to the corner store for me. I ran out of sugar and the cookies are already started. Marcus, you need to help me clean up the kitchen. The girls are busy getting the laundry off the line before it rains. Brian slowly dropped his glove and took the money Mom handed him. He jumped on his bike and rode to the store. On the way to Konopelski's, a group of boys caught his attention. It was Dennis and his friends. Dennis yelled to Brian, Hey, why did you call us a bunch of weaklings yesterday? Brian pedaled faster and called back over his shoulder, I didn't call you anything. Oh yes you did, and I'm going to get you good one of these days, Dennis threatened. Brian was puzzled, but after he returned home and got back to his baseball game, he forgot all about Dennis's threat. A few days later, Mom asked Brian to run to the store and pick up some eggs. I don't really want to go, Brian hesitated as he kicked at the dirt. That is in Dennis's neighborhood, and he threatened to get me. Angela can go with you then, Brian, Mom suggested. Brian and Angela quickly walked to the store together to buy the eggs. They decided to take a shortcut through the alley on their way home. Oh no, Angela gasped. Dennis and his gang had circled around them, and there was no way out of the alley except to go past them. The boys quickly grabbed Brian and unleashed a barrage of punches on his back and face. Please stop, Angela begged. I'll give you this candy if you let him go, she offered as she took some gumdrops out of her pockets. The boys grabbed the candy and took off. Brian and Angela ran home, and Mom treated Brian's bruises. Mom could tell that Brian was afraid of what would happen the next time he walked down the street. Brian had many fears as a young boy. She prayed this would not bring back his fears. What should I do, Dad? Brian asked that evening as he shared his problem with Dad. Dad thought a little before answering. Let's follow the advice that Jesus gave. Love our enemies, do good to those that hate us, and pray for those who persecute us. We'll keep a lookout for Dennis and his friends. The next time you see them, you could give them a can of soda and try to be their friend. Brian and Dad went to the store the next day and bought some soda. After that, the whole family kept a watch out for Dennis. One afternoon, Brian rushed breathlessly into the house. Hurry, I need the soda! A mixture of fear and courage crossed his face. Dad followed from a distance as Brian grabbed the cans and headed back out the door. Hey, would you guys like some soda? He held up the cans toward the bullies. Dennis and his friends turned their backs and shook their heads. Please take it, Brian urged as he handed them each a can. They grabbed the soda and sauntered back down the street, not even bothering to open it. The next week, Brian and Marcus were out playing when Dennis walked by. We saw your dad watching from the other side of the street when you gave us that soda. What are you, a baby? We never drank the soda. We just poured it down the toilet. You probably poisoned it. Nevertheless, Dennis and his friends never harassed Brian again. Dad's words rang true in Brian's mind. He had learned to repay good for evil, even when it hurt. God had given him the courage to do good to his enemies. Some of the boys that harassed and beat up Brian eventually became friendly with Brian and Marcus. Years later, when Brian got married, he bought a house on Fairview Street. While living there, he learned that one of the boys that had beaten him up 10 years earlier had taken his own life in that very house. It was another reminder of how living a life of pain and hopelessness can lead to bad decisions and despair. Praise God for a life worth living because of Jesus Christ.